Hey guys, Kory here. I want to show you guys a couple real quick modifications that I make to a jig. You know, as fishermen, we are generally tinkers. We just can't leave well enough alone. We take a bait and we always try to tweak it and tinker with it to make it a little bit better, or make it suit a certain purpose a little bit better. And a jig is probably the most modified bait in the fishing world. It seems like there's so many modifications that people want to make to jigs, and trim this and don't trim that, and cut this at this angle, and it just goes on and on. And the bottom line is there's a lot of different modifications to a jig, because a jig is a very versatile bait. You can use it so many different ways and for so many different situations, and with just a few modifications you can get it to pretty much fit whatever you're trying to do, generally speaking. So having said all that, I could do a whole nother video on different jig modifications, and in fact we might do that. But for right now, this video here is just going to be real quick. Show you a couple modifications I'm using for the purpose that I need right now, which is we're fishing deep. There's a brush pile sitting out here, and I'm gonna, there's kind of a flat, I'm gonna drag this football jig around the brush pile and stuff. So having said all that, one tool that if I'm fishing a jig I will never ever be without is a pair of thinning shears, just like your wife's beautician uses, or whatever. Just you can pick these up at beauty supply stores. I think these come from Walmart for just a few bucks. The reason that thinning shears are so valuable when it comes to modifying a jig is because of these two modifications I'm going to show you right here. The first one is if I take the jig and I want all, as you guys know, this jig here is not a hand tied jig. So as you guys know, with the rubber band you're going to have skirt material above the collar and the skirt material below it. And what I'm wanting to do is separate it and get the all the skirt material that goes above it. I want to just let that drape up over the head, just like this right here. So as you can tell, I got it all evenly divided. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these thinning shears and I'm just going to go ½ inch or so above the head of the jig and just make one snip. And I know it doesn't look like much, but what I did, now when I lay the jig flat or lay it out, pull out some of the strands here that didn't quite cut, but you can see I got just a little bit of flare up here around the collar of the jig, almost like a finesse jig, but I still got a lot more bulk in the skirt like a traditional jig. So it just kind of gives that jig a little bit different profile in the water. When it's in the water, it kind of lets it flare out just a little bit more than it would normally. The other modification, and this holds true, this one here is going to hold true with any jig I use, whether it's a flipping jig, a football jig, any jig out there that's got a fiber weed guard. This is the modification that I'm going to do. You hear so many guys talk about trimming the weed guard flush with the point of the hook, cut it at an angle. I don't like that, because that's going to do two things. First of all, it's going to open up the point of the hook to where you can get hung up more. And the reason that they say that is because they believe it increases hookup ratio. In my experience, I believe it does actually the opposite, because when you trim this back, it now stiffens that weed guard up to where it has a harder time collapsing out of the way when you set the hook. So what I'm going to do, again with the thinning shears, I'm going to come in right at the base of the weed guard, right up next to the head. I'm going to make one snip. You guys can tell that one snip with those thinning shears took out quite a few. There we go. Took out quite a few strands, and it really softened that weed guard up. Okay, but it softened it up enough that when you set the hook, it's easily going to collapse out of the way, but it's still long enough to protect the point of the hook. So that's really important. Don't cut it back even with the point of the hook, because that's just going to stiffen it up, and it's really going to defeat the purpose or make things worse for you. One more modification that I'm going to show you, and again, I do this about 90% of the time that I'm fishing a jig. The only exception would be if I'm fishing, excuse me, if I'm fishing, you know, flipping and laydowns and bushes and stuff like that. But if I'm just casting a jig, I always do this. Now let's take a pair of pliers. I'm going to open this hook up just a little bit. You can see how this hook, it comes back, and then it turns completely parallel to the shank of the hook. And it's just not a very wide throat to get a very big bite when you set the hook. A lot of times, if you notice, when you set the hook and you catch a fish with a jig, you might notice behind where the hook actually went through its mouth, you might see a scratch. And what that is is that's actually the point of that hook dragging before it finally bites and goes into the fish's mouth. Big part of why so many people talk about missing fish on jigs and losing fish on jigs is because the fish is eating it like you want them to, and they're getting it deep in their mouth like you want them to. But that hook, a lot of times, that point being like that, it'll skid on the roof of their mouth, and it won't actually bite and penetrate as deep in the mouth where you want it to. So all you're gonna do here is take a pair of pliers, and I'm gonna open it up just ever so slightly. I mean, almost not even enough to notice. But I want that, instead of just setting perfectly parallel with the shank of the hook, I want it opened up just a little bit. I'm gonna go a little bit more here. This is a good stiff, heavy wire hook, and I don't know if you guys can tell very well in the video, but it opened it up just a little bit, but it increased the throat here. It increased the amount of this opening to where now the point of the hook's facing out to where it's going to bite sooner in a fish's mouth, and that opening is a little bit bigger, so you're going to get a bigger chunk when you finally do get the hook to penetrate. So I just wanted to show you guys the modifications I made to this jig right now before I fish with it. So anyways, I'm gonna sign off for now, and I'm gonna go tie this jig on and try to get back to work in that brush pile. So for more product reviews, how-to videos, tips, tricks, you name it, check us out over there at GillzGoneWild.com. Thank you.